A naval fleet of China's People's Liberation Army has arrived in Nigeria. A frigate along with a supply ship were led by destroyer Nanning. Nanning has docked at the port of Lagos. The ships are to return on Thursday after a 5-day visit. And this is a rare visit by the Chinese military to Africa's Atlantic coast. What is the dragon up to, really? The Nigerian Navy says it is for diplomatic reasons that the visit aims to strengthen ties between Chinese and Nigerian navies. But let's not forget that we are talking about China here. Is it looking to establish a naval base in Africa's Atlantic coast? Because it has for long made efforts to grow its influence in that part of the world.
Imagine a map of Africa, a continent with vast resources, booming populations, and strategic seas on its flanks. Now imagine beneath the surface of aid, infrastructure, and trade lies a deeper game, a game of military reach, global logistics, and silent bases. China is not just investing in roads and ports in Africa. It is quietly embedding strategic capacity. With each investment, each infrastructure deal, each partnership, questions multiply. What is China really building? Why here? Why now? And most importantly, friend or foe? Tonight, we go behind the headlines to examine China's hidden military footprint in Africa. A footprint that could redefine the balance of power. In 2017, China's first officially acknowledged overseas military facility opened in Djibouti, the People's Liberation Army support base in Djibouti. Located at the mouth of the Red Sea, it sits astride one of the world's most critical maritime choke points, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Officially, the base supports anti-piracy operations, evacuations, and logistics. But analysts say it offers China something deeper, a foothold for global naval operations, intelligence collection, and naval power projection. As ships dock, as rails and funds pump through Africa, the base in Djibouti has become a symbol. The question is, symbol of what? Friend, foe, or something in between? One base is not an empire, but a network can be. Reports show China is considering or negotiating second and third bases in Africa, including along the Atlantic coast or in port facilities in Mozambique, Tanzania, or Angola. Even when not clearly labeled military bases, the dual-use infrastructure speaks volumes. Ports built with Chinese funding, airfields upgraded, logistics hubs expanded. When a naval base is both port, logistics, and commercial center, the line between commerce and military subtly blurs. For African nations, these are opportunities, investment, jobs, infrastructure. For global powers, they are alarms. If China builds the architecture of bases, will nations still count them as friends? Africa stands at a crossroads. On one hand, a continent with tremendous promise, resources, population, ambition. On the other, a history of external influence, extraction, and dependency. China pitches investment, infrastructure, partnership. Many African states welcome the financing and the speed of Chinese delivery. But with that comes questions. Who controls the infrastructure? Who benefits from the deals? And what happens when ports built by China serve strategic military roles? If China's presence is framed as friendship, some analysts argue it may also come with strings, strategic leverage, access, alignment. For Africa, that can mean both opportunity and risk. The world's supply lines depend on oceans, ports, and access. The Indian Ocean, the Red Sea, the Atlantic flank of Africa, each is a corridor of influence. For the United States and NATO, maintaining access and alignment has been central. But now China's footprint in Africa threatens to unbalance established logistics. A U.S. general warned, "The thing I am most worried about is a Chinese base on the Atlantic coast of Africa. If China secures bases along the Atlantic or Indian Ocean, trade routes shift. Influence flows change. the architecture of global power quietly tilts. So, is China friend or foe? The answer is not simple. China presents itself as a partner. No colonial past, no overt doctrine of dominance. But critics point to debt, control of infrastructure, and opaque agreements. Chinese military assistance to African states has increased. Arms sales, training, joint exercises. For African governments, the partnership may offer realism, diversification of partners, alternatives to Western conditions, faster delivery. But for global powers, these same moves raise strategic alarms. In this grand chessboard, Africa is not merely a pawn, but a battlefield for influence. What happens next? Analysts outline several possibilities. Scenario A: China builds a full base on Africa's Atlantic coast, offering a new launch point into the Atlantic and challenging Western naval dominance. Scenario B: Africa accepts Chinese investment but maintains diversified partnerships with Western and regional powers, preserving strategic flexibility. Scenario C: African nations resist base expansion, leverage Chinese infrastructure for commerce but block formal military access, preserving sovereignty. Each scenario carries consequences: trade flows, regional alignments, naval presence, supply chain resilience. For Africa, the choices made now will shape the next 50 years of geopolitics. The question is, will they build with friends, neighbors, or shadows? In the end, the greatest shifts are often the quietest. China's overt military footprint in Africa is small, but its strategic architecture is large. Friends can build roads, allies support trade. But bases change geography. For Africa, the arrival of China's military presence marks a pivot, from being a site of investment to becoming a site of strategy. Whether friend or foe depends on who writes the next chapter: African states, global powers, or both. It is a story of power, presence, and purpose, and it is unfolding now.